families with one another. We are live with the growing search for the people responsible.
The FBI is testing new DNA evidence found near the home of Nancy Guthrie. We take you live to Arizona to break down the findings so far.
And the U.S. prepares for another round of high-stakes talks with Iran over their nuclear program. A political science expert will join us to break down what each side wants.
Taking a live look outside, it's really starting to feel like spring out there. We are tracking the possibility for record highs today.
All right, we thank you for joining us here at 7 a.m. on your Monday morning. Let's kick it off with Mike Kaplan here. He's got some great news in the weather department with regard to temperatures.
Yesterday we hit 60, tied for the warmest day of the year. Today we're going to beat that by several degrees, and we're going to smoke a record. The record is only 58 degrees. That thing is history. The only issue, we've been talking about this, that fog out there, more on that in just a little bit, but on this President's Day, you got a winter on the way. We have temperatures headed for the low to mid 60s this afternoon, 45 at 9, still a little patchy fog, but it's going to be going away by then. Record high could be toast already at noon, certainly gone in the afternoon hours, feeling like mid-April instead of mid-February. Beautiful sunrise in progress over the lake. It's 40 and cloudy at O'Hare. A little bit of a south-southwest wind now at 8 miles per hour, and as we stir up the atmosphere, it's going to help disperse some of this fog. 40 at O'Hare looks like the warmest number on there. 37 at Woodstock, 36 Joliet, Morris 32, and where temperatures are colder, that's where some of the fog is at its worst. That dense fog advisory will be in effect for the majority of Chicagoland, just another couple of hours, but the visibility numbers are gradually improving. All right, let's see if it's causing any problems on the road. Anthony taking over the travel detail. How are we looking?
Decent right now. A couple things to be aware of, though. Dempster Street, just east of the Tri-State Tollway, I-294, is closed down due to an accident. So if you usually use that exit off I-294, you might need to head further north to Willow to make your way east. Also, let's see. Oh, it's cleared up. Okay. Your inbound Eisenhower had been dealing with an accident that is running better now. Here are your drive times. It's 29 minutes inbound from O'Hare to downtown on the Kennedy. 28 minutes inbound on the Eisenhower from Route 390 to downtown. A half hour is the ride time on the Stevenson between I-355 and Lakeshore Drive. And if you're coming in on the Dan Ryan, it's a 22-minute ride inbound from 95th to downtown. Also, Metro trains are running smoothly, but there's a couple of minor delays on the Union Pacific Northwest line and the BNSF. So if you use either of those two lines, you might want to check that Ventra app.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Now to a developing story we're following. Chicago police, they're still searching for the men behind two deadly carjackings in the city.
One of the victims was remembered at a vigil over the weekend. Roseanne is live this morning with more. Roseanne?
Well, police say that young victim was confronted by two armed men who demanded his car and other property, but then shot him as they left. That victim being remembered as a bright, talented young man. Now, over the weekend, family and loved ones gathered. They had pictures and posters and left flowers in memory of 22-year-old Darwin Tirado, who was killed just before 4 a.m. February 11th as he sat in his car. That was on the 700 block of West Waveland. A 38-year-old man with him wasn't hurt. Tirado worked for Chicago chef Art Smith, who employed both him and his mother. Smith, along with Tirado's family, now calling for justice.
And this was so incredibly stupid. It was, you know, the child was doing nothing, and he, you know, he's a hardworking kid. He was going to college, and the guy just wanted his car, and it's just terrible that people don't have any regard for life.
Now to that second carjacking. Police say that within an hour of Tirado's shooting, there was a second carjacking using his vehicle. It was in Bronzeville at 37th and Lake Park. Again, no suspects that we know of at this moment. Back to you in the studio.
And Roseanne, sounds like one of the victims are pretty tight with Chef Art Smith. Had they worked together for a while?
Right. Well, Tirado's mother had worked for Chef Smith for more than 20 years. He said she was with him from the beginning. So her son was like a member of the family to him. He said he had a really bright future, and he's really just crushed by this happening, especially in, as he put it, the city that he loves, in a neighborhood that he loves. So this has just been a really tough blow.
You know, Roseanne, I also want to ask you, too, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that police don't have any suspects in custody. But do police have any leads that we know of?
Right. We are heard. We are waiting for a response to find out if they have any information at all that would help lead to the suspects. But they are connecting those two incidents in Bronzeville and the one in Lakeview last week.
All right, Roseanne, a lot of details there, but thank you so much for your report. We'll check in with you again. All right, also developing this morning, some national news, a new message of hope from Savannah Guthrie as investigators find new evidence near the site of her mother's disappearance.
Caroline Elliott is in Tucson, Arizona, following developments with the very latest this morning on where the investigation stands. Caroline, what is the latest, first off, in terms of this DNA testing involving the glove and when we could possibly see some results here?
Yeah, Anthony. Well, we know the FBI found 16 gloves during this search, but there's one glove in particular that investigators are really focusing in on right now. And that was a glove that was found about 2 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's home. Investigators say it appears to match the gloves worn by the suspect in that surveillance video. And on top of that, they say the DNA profile is different on those gloves. So again, really focusing in on these gloves right now. We know investigators will put that DNA sample into a system called CODIS, which is the FBI's database. It's a national database they use to track people down and identify DNA. Now, we're told that process takes about 24 hours. So if there's a match, we could very well have some answers here soon.
Okay, well, that's good news that, you know, hopefully there's something that's developing with this. But I kind of have to ask, what happens if there's no match in CODIS or any law enforcement database?
Yeah, well, Gabriella, we do know that CODIS is not a perfect system exactly. It doesn't have everyone in it. We do know that it includes people who have already been convicted, arrested, and also other forensic evidence examples from other unsolved crimes. So we'll give you an example here with the Bryan Kohberger case. That's the man who killed 4 University of Idaho students back in 2022. So in that case, we know investigators recovered certain DNA from that crime scene. They took that DNA, they put it into CODIS, and they did not get a match because before then, Kohberger wasn't involved in any other serious crime. So from there, investigators put that sample into a more advanced method called investigative genetic genealogy. So in other words, investigators were trying to track down a family tree so they could maybe identify a family member. Now, we're told this process takes a lot longer. In Kohberger's case, it took up to 47 days. So not as fast as CODIS would be, but if the suspect in that video and if the DNA on those gloves do get a match in CODIS, again, we could very well have some answers here soon.
All right, Caroline Elliott live in Tucson for us this morning. Thank you very much for that update, Caroline.
All right, and taking a live look outside now here at 7:08. Time for another check of your forecast. And Mike, we know that Sky Fox is down for the rest of the morning because of some of this fog hanging around.
Right. And I get a lot of people that ask me online, what is the 2800? They see this camera and they're like, what is 2800? That is 2800 North Lakeshore Drive. It's a building there at Diversity in Lakeshore, so it gets its own little label there. You can see it's a little murky from that view, and I think some of that may actually be condensation on our camera lens. Take a look at this shot. This is from the roof of our building downtown. And if you look here, kind of in the lower left portion of the screen, that's actually fog beginning to roll into the city, at least southwestern portion of the city. I'm going to wait and see whether in the next hour or so some of this fog begins to kind of weave its way through our skyscrapers, and then we'll look down on that. I think that is going to be the case. Current visibility, let's look at this in miles or fractions thereof. And where you see the shaded areas is where the visibility is the poorest. Notice Midway has now dropped to a half mile. That could lead to some delays coming out of MDW. O'Hare not as bad. In general, the farther west you go, the lower the visibility. So we do have that dense fog advisory here. I'll call that up so you can kind of see where that is. The dense fog advisory will be in effect until 9 o'clock. It includes southern Cook County, including including Midway, all of you in Northwest Indiana, and about as far north as I-90 going through Kane County. After that, we're going to get a record high temperature today. The record is only 58. We'll sail past that with low to mid 60s on the way. Morning fog yielding to partly sunny skies. This is not the only 60-degree day in my forecast. I'll share that 7-day with you in just a little bit. Gabriella?
All right. Thank you, Mike. Stay with us. A political science expert joins us to break down those high-stakes talks between the U.S. and Iran happening this week.
And today is the last day of the Bears coat drive, so dig those gently used coats out of the back of the closet. The Bears, along with Jewel, the Salvation Army, and Sherway Movers, they're asking for those coats, so drop them off at Jewel. If you need more info, go to chicagobears.com/coat drive. We'll be right back.
Yours.
The time now is 7:13. Here are some of the top stories we're following.
Chicago police have connected 2 deadly carjackings to the same people. On February 11th, police say 2 men shot 22-year-old Darwin Tirado right near Waveland and Halstead in the Lakeview neighborhood. And then an hour later, police believe the men who stole that car used it in another deadly carjacking in Bronzeville. Those men are still on the run.
This morning, the FBI is testing DNA evidence found on a glove near Nancy Guthrie's home. The agency says it appears to match a glove worn by a suspect seen on a doorbell camera video. It has been 16 days since Nancy disappeared.
New claims this morning that DePaul and Loyola universities are steering low-income families toward expensive loans while offering tuition breaks to students from wealthier families. The schools are among 41 private and public institutions named in the report. The report was done by a progressive think tank called New America, and it claims that the schools are giving Pell Grant recipients Federal Plus loans that they can't afford to pay back.
All right, and this week, Iran and the U.S. will meet in Switzerland to discuss the future of Tehran's nuclear program. Both sides renewed negotiations earlier this month in order to prevent a military confrontation. Now, William Muck is a professor of political science at North Central College. He's here to talk about what could come from these talks. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right. A lot has happened over this weekend, including President Trump confirming a second aircraft carrier is being deployed to the Middle East. And now at the same time, he's emphasizing that he wants negotiations with Iran to continue. Professor Muck, how should we interpret these seemingly kind of dual tracks of military pressure and diplomacy?
I think that's absolutely right. We're seeing both the carrot and the stick. And I think the Trump administration is trying to figure out which method is going to work best. So sending the second aircraft carrier is a significant move. We would call this coercive diplomacy. So the Trump administration is saying we want conversations to go on. We want to continue talking. Oh, but by the way, we're sending in an aircraft carrier. If those conversations don't go well, we have alternative plans. So it's putting additional pressure on the Iranian regime. We saw this also in Venezuela, where the United States redeployed a big chunk of its military before engaging in military action. So it doesn't preclude diplomacy and conversations, but I think the president is keeping that option available.
You know, and I apologize if you kind of already answered it during that answer there, but I think a lot of people have questions, including maybe what you think the primary objective behind these actions from the administration is.
This is the fundamental, most important question that we need to think about. What is the goal of the administration? And there are a variety of them. So last week and the week before that, when the protests in Iran were taking place, it was very clear that the president was talking about the Iranian people and the protesters and regime change. Now, that is a very, very ambitious goal. That's sort of, think about Iraq 2003. That's a really big goal. Other goals might be simply to prohibit Iran from enriching nuclear weapons or uranium to get weapons, right? So that's a much more small-scale goal. Or what about the missiles? Or what about proxies in the region? So one of the things we need to learn from the administration is what are their ultimate goals, because those goals will dictate policy. The easiest pathway really would be to negotiate another nuclear deal and then leave some of the other issues for the future. But we will wait and see. The president tends to jump around in terms of what he wants. And so I think that's one thing we need to be paying close attention to.
You know, if they do figure out, you know, what kind of path to go forward with, how likely do you think that these diplomatic efforts are to succeed? And, you know, if they fall short, what kinds of, what are the next steps with this?
Yeah, absolutely right. So I think both sides have an interest in coming to an agreement. The United States would love to have a long-term deal that addressed the potential of Iran developing a nuclear weapon. If we could limit their nuclear enrichment, if we could watch all those programs, that's in the United States' strategic interest. Iran also has an interest in removing these very oppressive sanctions that have been on the regime for years. So both sides have an interest. But in some ways, it comes back to that earlier question about what are the goals of the administration. If the United States is going to push for regime change, if the United States is going to push for cracking down on the ballistic missiles or support for proxies in the region, that could be a sticking point that Iran won't talk about. So that's the big question. The goal will dictate whether these negotiations work. And if they don't, then again, that's when we're likely to see a military option.
All right. And I want to ask you this, too, because I feel like sometimes we look at these you know, negotiations, these tensions in a big picture, but we don't think about the people who actually live there. So what do you think these geopolitical tensions, where do they leave ordinary Iranians?
This is one of the more heartbreaking elements of all of this, right? You're hearing stories come out of Iran. The population has just been devastated by the regime cracking down. You know, numbers are at least 7,000 people were killed in the crackdown and the protesters. That number could go up. You've got an Iranian society that is just devastated. And let's be clear about this, no longer really supports the regime. The regime is effectively cracking down on a population that doesn't want them in power anymore. So this is a real humanitarian concern. Now, it's an incredibly difficult operation to try to change that regime. Again, very, very similar to 2003. But the people themselves in Iran are really suffering. And that's why we should be paying attention to the president to see how central is that goal of the administration, because it is really awful to see what's happened to the Iranian people.
All right, Professor William Muck with North Central College, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for making it so easy to understand.
Thanks for having me.
Talk to you soon.
All right, 7:18 as we take a live look outside. A little fog in the area, but it's going to be nice and warm outside. Record-breaking warmth, right,
Yes,
Mike?
the record is 58, and you can see that fog is indeed now marching toward the city. But it is on the move. This is what we call advection fog. And we can see this here from Willis Tower coming in from the southwest. Little areas of lower visibility, low clouds. Most of the really thick fog continues to be southwest of downtown. But this whole whole area is beginning to advance to the northeast, and that will continue for a couple more hours. The dense fog advisory is in effect until 9 o'clock. It does not include the city, but look now, even at O'Hare, visibility has dropped to 1 mile there. If you're flying this morning, there may be some delays, both Midway and O'Hare. Some parts of northwest Indiana, especially around Valparaiso, seeing reduced visibility. And I'm a little bit concerned that maybe this fog hangs on an hour or two longer, which could impact eventually the highs, but only by a couple of degrees. I'm still going to go 64, but I may not be surprised if it ends up being more like a 61 or 62. No matter what, we're breaking the record of 58 today. And this is not even the warmest day of the week. I think that's going to be Wednesday. Couple chances for some rain this week, the first of which will arrive tomorrow evening, and then kind of a secondary chance early, like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning Wednesday. Then Wednesday afternoon, at least 65. The next chance of rain will be Thursday, especially in the afternoon and evening, with a high of 55 degrees, a little cooler at the lakefront. And then it will be chillier here Saturday and Sunday, with temperatures more typical for what will then be late February. But temperatures are going to bounce back up again. Maybe not this high, but they're going to be above average all of next week. Anthony, what are we looking like on the roads with this fog becoming a little bit more widespread?
Yes, indeed. Actually, it's been improved since last time we checked in. That accident I mentioned on Dempster right along the tri-state is now cleared up. So you'll have no problems getting off on Dempster off of I-294 near Des Plaines. Here are your drive times as we approach 7:30. On your Monday morning, it's a 29-minute ride inbound from O'Hare on the Kennedy to downtown. 28 minutes inbound on the Eisenhower from Route 390 to downtown. 31 minutes is your inbound drive time on the Stevenson. And if you're taking the Dan Ryan, it's 22 minutes inbound from 95th to downtown. We will be right back after this.
Ends February 27th.
Welcome back, 724. A bill to keep the Bears' next stadium in Illinois is up for its first hearing this week.
If passed, the legislation would help build a stadium in Arlington Heights. The measure provides financing for infrastructure and the so-called pilot bill that would give the Bears and other major developers the ability to negotiate property tax rates. Last week, Governor Pritzker sounded optimistic about the direction of talks.
There's a lot of discussion, a lot of ongoing conversation with the Bears, and indeed, frankly, progress that's been made. So I'm pleased about that. But, I'm going to let the Bears talk about what it is that they want to get done and how they want to get it done.
A plan to move the Arlington Heights project forward has ramped up since the Bears floated a possible move to Northwest Indiana. The hearing on the bill is set for Thursday.
Meantime, the clock is ticking for lawmakers in Indiana to finalize an agreement for a stadium. The Senate passed a measure that would create the Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority. That would be the entity responsible for planning and financing the project. But that bill has yet to move through the state house so that they can get it on the governor's desk by the end of the month.
Meanwhile, House lawmakers in Indiana have passed a bill that lets local and state police enforce federal immigration laws. The Chicago Tribune reports the bill sets up the Department of Correction to train sheriffs on how to cooperate with the feds. The bill also allows the Attorney General to sue any government agency, school, or jail that doesn't comply. Governor J.B. Pritzker will deliver his State of the State address on Wednesday. He's expected to talk about the state's $2.2 billion budget gap, as well as the impact President Donald Trump is having on Illinois during his second term. Pritzker is running for a third term, but is also viewed as a possible contender for 2028. All right, speaking of, the Illinois primary is a little over a month away.
And this week, our political reporter, Paris Schutz, he's going to be hosting a series of debates with the candidates competing in some of the big races here. So tonight, it's going to be the Democratic candidates who are vying to replace Dick Durbin in the Senate. They are Congresswoman Robin Kelly, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, and Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. The debate starts at 6 o'clock. It's right here on Fox Chicago. And we have everything you need to know all in one place on our website. Go to fox32chicago.com/election. All right, Mike is here with a little preview of what is coming up in his weather report. Mike, is going to be nice.
Yes.
Toasty outside today.
We'll be in the 60s later on, but we have some fog, and some of that fog is now making its way into the city. Our beautiful sunrise still looking good, but a lot of you seeing barely anything in front of your face. We'll look at the visibility numbers here in just a little bit and talk about this unusual warmth when we come back.
on Fox.
Chicago police have connected 2 deadly carjackings to the same people. Last Wednesday, police say 2 men shot 22-year-old Darwin Tirado near Waveland and Halstead in Lakeview. An hour later, police believe the men who stole his car used it in another deadly carjacking in Bronzeville. Those men are still on the run.
Governor J.B. Pritzker will deliver his State of the State address on Wednesday. He is expected to talk about the state's $2.2 billion budget gap, as well as the impact that President Donald Trump is having on Illinois during Trump's second term. Pritzker is running for a third term, but is also viewed as a possible presidential contender for 2028.
We're beginning the week in a partial government shutdown. Lawmakers could not get a funding deal done by the holiday weekend, with Republicans largely rejecting Democrats' push for reforms to ICE. One of their biggest demands calls for DHS officers to get a judicial warrant before entering private property. It's unclear when the shutdown will end. But meantime, this shutdown hitting air travel particularly hard, especially during this long holiday weekend.
Say Kwan joins us live at O'Hare Airport with the latest. Say.
Hey, good morning to you guys. Well, these workers here behind me, the ones who screen your items and your luggage before you actually are able to walk to your gates, are putting in some time right now, obviously, knowing that they won't be getting paid for the hours that they worked today. Now, TSA falls under the Department of Homeland Security, which means all TSA workers have been working without pay since Saturday when the funding lapse started. According to the department's contingency plan from September, about 95% of TSA employees are considered essential workers, and they are required to continue working even if there is a shutdown. If you remember last fall, though, during that record 43-day government shutdown, we saw massive impacts to air travel nationwide because TSA workers and air traffic controllers weren't getting paid, and naturally they were calling out of work. But this shutdown is a little bit different here, guys. Unlike TSA, we know air traffic controllers fall under the FAA, which is part of the Department of Transportation, not Homeland Security. So they, at least, will still be able to work and get their paychecks. Meanwhile, we know travel experts are saying flight delays are still expected today. Here at O'Hare, we are seeing about 75 delays, 5 cancellations, and at Midway, about 40 delays so far. Guys?
Wow. Okay. Well, say a question for you. This impacts more than air travel, we know. Can you tell our audience what else is impacted with this?
Yeah, really good question. Obviously, there are several agencies that fall under the Department of Homeland Security. Of course, TSA being a huge one here, but we also know agencies like the U.S. Coast Guard and also FEMA, who obviously help out in life-saving situations and disaster relief. Those are going to be 2 big agencies that are going to be impacted, just for examples there.
And say, how can travelers prepare if they have to go to the airport today?
Well, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. When you get to the airport, right, you always want to make sure that you are on time. Of course, when it comes to a shutdown like this, it's always a good idea to get here well before you think you should get here, but also make sure that you're checking into your flight, too, before you get to the airport, not when you're in line here at TSA. Guys?
This is a good time to make sure you're planning ahead. Thank you, Say, for that report. All right, and also Brian Jackson joins us now with the latest on the search for Nancy Guthrie. Brian.
Well, there are new details in the search for Nancy Guthrie. The FBI found a glove with DNA near Guthrie's home. They say that it appears to match the one that was worn by the suspect that was seen on her doorbell camera video. The agency is now testing that glove for any potential matches. It has been 16 days since Nancy first disappeared. Police have not made any arrests. But over the weekend, they detained at least 4 people who were questioned and later released. In a new video posted on social media, Savannah Guthrie made another plea for her mother's safe return.
We still have hope, and we still believe. And I wanted to say to whoever has her or knows where she is, that it's never too late. It is never too late to do the right thing.
The FBI has doubled its reward for information that could lead to an arrest. It now stands at $100,000. Time is now 7:34 on this beautiful Monday. We had a little bit of fog earlier this morning. Mike, is all that out the way now?
No, take a look at it. It's right there. It is actually starting to weave its way through some of our skyscrapers downtown, Brian. And in general, the farther west you have been, the thicker that fog has been. But now it's overspreading a bigger portion of Chicagoland. I'm not overly concerned about this. There may be some delays at the airports, but what I will say is the dense fog advisory is set to expire at 9. Don't be surprised if this gets extended by an hour or so. We'll see. And then that may slow the warm-up to the point that we lose a couple of degrees off the high. Right now it's 40 at O'Hare, already way above the normal high for this time of year. Looking at the visibility numbers, these are really low, especially southwest of the city where we're looking at maybe a 1/16 of a mile in some spots. Half mile currently at Midway and only 3/4 of a mile at O'Hare. Even in parts of northwest Indiana, you're dealing with some fog. Once the winds pick up, the sun gets higher, fog should become less and less of a problem, but it may hang on just a little bit longer than 9 a.m. We'll keep you posted here throughout the morning. The rest of the day characterized by unseasonable warmth with temperatures getting into the 60s, blowing away the record set back in 1921, which is only 58. During the day tomorrow, still way above normal, cooler at the lakefront, but mainly 50s instead of 60s. And there will be some rain coming in by tomorrow evening. Perhaps another shot of some showers, maybe even a rumble of thunder with this cluster coming in around 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then we're done with it. The rest of Wednesday clearing out and temperatures likely to be even warmer than today. Got a couple of lovely photos, the first of which here showing sand, sun, snow, and ice at Indiana Dunes State Park. Lori Anderson giving us a look there out over beautiful Lake Michigan. Pretty scene there. Thank you, Lori. And how about this scene? This was sent to me via Facebook from Wendy Bassuk Brewer, and they're at Fripp Island, South Carolina. That is south of Charleston, and they were treated to a spectacular double rainbow. That is extremely well defined. Great picture there, Wendy. Thank you for sharing that, and hopefully you're enjoying your time there along the Atlantic. If you ever get to Charleston, go to Hall's Chop House, one of my favorite restaurants anywhere in the world. And they did not pay for that endorsement. 7:37, take a look at the travel times. Not too bad on this President's Day. We'll be back with more of Good Day after this.
today.
Welcome back. A new study says the Chicago Police Department should hire more civilians to ease staffing problems.
The department has been dealing with these problems for years, which leads to officers working longer hours and more overtime spending. The workforce allocation study conducted by the Matrix Consulting Group claims the problem could be solved by shifting 600 positions to civilian staffers. Now, according to the study, that would free officers up to do more core police work like patrolling, investigations, and calls for service.
President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, says that a small security force will remain in Minnesota after the drawdown of immigration enforcement there. More than 1,000 agents have left the state, with hundreds more departing in the coming days. Holman says the agents will also keep investigating fraud allegations and the protests that disrupted a church service. Meantime, Attorney General Pam Bondi claims that all of the Epstein files have now been released. This comes nearly 2 months after the legal deadline laid out in the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The files, which Bondi claims are newly released, include several pages of names she says appear in the Epstein records, along with a selection of photos, though questions do remain about whether the material is actually new.
New details on the controversial 2024 death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Navalny died in a Russian prison, but new reports say he was poisoned. Russian leaders initially claimed he got sick and lost consciousness while on a walk. Now, a new statement by European and NATO countries concludes it was a type of frog poison the Russian government used to murder Navalny. Supporters of Navalny gathered in Chicago saying the Russian government oppresses each one of its citizens.
Of us, we were faced of 5-10 years of charge because we were against the war, against the Putin, we were the human rights, we were for democracy. We have no democracy, we have just a regime which killing people. Even right now, you seeing me, and this Putin's regime is killing someone.
News accusations, calling it propaganda. President Trump says his new board of peace is pledging $5 billion to rebuild Gaza. The money would also reportedly commit thousands of personnel to international stabilization and police forces in the war-torn territory. The president did not detail which member nations are contributing to the fund. The United Nations, World Bank, and EU estimate rebuilding the Palestinian territory will cost $70 billion.
After a devastating fire tore through an Englewood church, its congregation is once again worshiping. Renewal Life Church opened its doors Sunday at a temporary space in South Shore. That fire last Thanksgiving destroyed their original building at 58th and Emerald. Months later, they are open for worship in a building not far away. It's at 74th and Stony Island. That's also in the South Shore neighborhood.
We wanted to share with the world that recovery is possible in the midst of times where many people felt like, what do we do next? A lot of our church members were like, all right, so do we need to find a new church? And some people are discouraged. We didn't even know we were reaching people in Michigan. And so people started sending things in the mail and donating and helping us around the country.
The pastor says the fire also destroyed the offices of several small businesses and his campaign office, as he is running for Congress as well. There is a link on the church website if you would like to donate to their comeback.
7:43 now. Here's a look at what's coming up on Good Day Chicago at 8 and 9. Keep it right here.
Is all new Tuesday on Fox.
Welcome back. A bill to keep the Bears' next stadium in Illinois is up for its first hearing this week.
If it passes, the legislation would help, in theory, build a stadium out in Arlington Heights. This measure provides financing for infrastructure and the so-called pilot bill that would give the Bears and other major developments the ability to negotiate property tax rates. Last week, Governor Pritzker did sound optimistic about the direction of these conversations.
There's a lot of discussion, a lot of ongoing conversation with the Bears, and indeed, frankly, progress that's been made. So I'm pleased about that. But, I'm going to let the Bears talk about what it is that they want to get done and how they want to get it done.
A plan to move the Arlington Heights project forward has ramped up since the Bears floated a possible move to Northwest Indiana. A hearing on the bill is set for Thursday. Meantime, clock is ticking for our neighbors in Indiana to finalize their agreement for a stadium measure. Now, the Indiana State Senate passed a measure that would create the Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority, which would be responsible for planning and financing the project. But that bill, a version of it, has yet to move through the State House so that they can get it on the governor's desk by the end of the month.
Meanwhile, House lawmakers in Indiana have passed a bill that lets local and state police enforcement enforce federal immigration laws. The Chicago Tribune reports the bill sets up the Department of Correction to train sheriffs on how to cooperate with the feds. The bill also allows the Attorney General to sue any government agency, school, or jail that doesn't comply. A new report claims DePaul and Loyola universities is steering low-income families towards expensive loans while offering tuition breaks to students from wealthier families. The schools are among 41 private and public institutions allegedly engaging in the practice, according to a progressive think tank, New America. It claims a high percentage of lower-income families are taking out loans they can't afford to pay back, sometimes amounting to more than their annual earnings. The report focuses on federal Parent Plus loans, which can be taken out for the total cost of attendance. But the report argues their high fixed interest rates and origination fees aren't designed for low-income families. So the report broke down the data. At Loyola, about 48% of PLUS loan borrowers were parents of Pell Grant recipients, and the average amount owed was around $46,400. And then at DePaul, about 53% of PLUS borrowers were parents of Pell recipients. Those families owed an average of $33,000. So in a statement, DePaul spokesperson says in part that the university is transparent with families about loan options, and ultimately families make the decision to proceed with loans as they see fit. It goes on to say that families taking out federal plus loans are required to complete loan counseling. We also reached out to Loyola, but have not heard back.
All right, 10 till 8 o'clock on your Monday morning. Here's a quick look at your drive times as we head to a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Good Day after this.
Find an agent at amfam.com.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is announcing a proposal that would put the pride flag back up at the Stonewall National Monument in New York City.
Yeah, that flag was taken down earlier this month by the Trump administration, saying it did not comply with its rules on flags. But it is flying again at that monument after a group of elected officials raised it last week in defiance of the White House. Now Schumer says he wants to make sure it never comes down again.
I am introducing legislation to designate the pride flag as a congressionally authorized flag in America, and that means it can be flown here and everywhere else, and no one can take it down.
The Stonewall Monument stands in front of the Stonewall Inn. That's a bar and the site of the 1969 riots that launched the gay rights movement. That monument, which is part of the National Park Service, was established by President Obama in 2016 and is the first federally designated LGBTQ plus rights monument.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture has issued a large recall on ground beef. The meat may be contaminated with E. coli. The recall affects around 23,000 pounds of ground beef produced by CS Beef Packers. The Food Inspection and Safety Service identified the presence of E. coli during a test. The USDA says the recalled products were intended for food service locations such as restaurants and cafeterias instead of grocery stores. So hopefully you're in the clear. There are no reported illnesses yet from this product.
A ship that had sunk in Lake Michigan more than 150 years ago has been found. Look at this. After a search that spanned nearly 60 years, luxury steamer Lac La Belle was found back in October of 2022. The shipwreck was discovered about 20 miles offshore between Racine and Kenosha. The announcement of the discovery was delayed because the team wanted to display a three-dimensional video model of the ship. The luxury steamer sank back in October of 1872. 53 passengers and crew were on board. 8 people died after one of the lifeboats from that ship capsized.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
Fascinating discovery. Yes, indeed. All right, we have plenty more Good Day Chicago ahead, so keep it right here. We hope your Monday morning's off to a great start, everybody.
Katie, have you ever heard about
something greater.
Welcome back. The U.S. military boards another sanctioned oil tanker in the Indian Ocean. The vessel is officially blacklisted for violating international trade restrictions. The Pentagon says the military had been tracking the tanker from the Caribbean Sea in an attempt to target illicit oil connected to Venezuela.
A trial is set to begin today in Georgia for Colin Gray, the father of a suspected high school shooter. Gray faces multiple felony counts, including second-degree murder and cruelty to children. Prosecutors allege that he provided his son with the firearm used in the September 2024 mass shooting at Appalachia High School that left 4 people dead and 9 others injured. Both Gray and his teenage son have pleaded not guilty as the state prepares to present its case.
Warner Brothers Discovery is reportedly reconsidering its sale options after receiving an enticing takeover offer from Paramount Global. Bloomberg reports Paramount raised its all-cash bid and added